Hello and welcome to today's lesson. Today we are going to be taking all the rhythms that we've been looking at so far, our crotchets, our pairs of quavers, crotchet rests, and also our loud dynamics for forte and our quiet dynamics for piano. And we're going to put them together and see if we can perform a duet. Now, a duet in music is when you get two lines of music happening at the same time. And they're not always the same line of music. So when they are composed or written, we try and get them to fit together. So here's what a duet would look like on the screen now. You see it says part 1 and part 2. So the top line is part 1 all the way through, and the bottom line is part 2 all the way through. You see that there are 3 lines or 3 sections, the beginning, the top line, and then the next line or system, which is when we have a pair of lines with a big long line before them. That's letter A, and then we have letter B, and finally we get to the end. So I think we should learn this one line at a time, and we're going to start off by just looking through part 1. And I've got a little bit of an ostinato in the background, a repeated pattern, and I'm going to find the pulse there to start with. I think it's always important that we find our pulse together before we begin. And the first time through this part 1, I'm going to use microphones. So I'm going to have a forte microphone and a piano microphone, and we're going to see how we get on. Okay, remember we're going to cover our microphones for the rests. Ready, steady, off we go. Rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Okay, I found that a little bit of a challenge when I was trying to cover up my rests there, so I think I'm going to try it one more time. This time I'm going to do claps. So when it's forte, I'm going to use my whole hands for a loud clap, and when it's piano, I'm going to use 2 fingers in each hand, and I'm going to do this for my rests. See if it confuses me a little bit less. I'm going to keep the words in as well, so this is part 1, one more time. Ready, steady, from the top. Rice, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, naan bread, rice, rice, naan bread, naan bread, rice, naan bread, naan bread. Very good. Now, I don't know if it's a tempo that's a little bit too fast. Here's my sign for tempo. Or if it's the fact that we've got lots of rests and we have to remember about being loud and being quiet, but that feels quite challenging to me so far. So I'm just going to remind you about the option of pausing the video, rewinding a little bit, a minute or so, and then finding where the tempo changes, which is down in one of these corners. So you can adjust the speed of the video and watch it back at half speed, and that gives you a little bit more time to think about what's going on. Now we're going to try part 2. So it's similar music. Some bits are identical to part 1, some bits are slightly different. So we'll try it on its own. We're going to do microphones to start with. I'm just looking through the music to see where the challenge might be, and I think the biggest challenge is going to be at the start of line 2, where it says letter A. Don't need to show you what a letter A looks like, because that starts off with a rest. Whichever way around we're going to do our rest, it starts off with a little squiggly mark that means a silence. So we need to make sure we don't fall into that trap, because it's the first time we see a rest in this music when we're on part 2. So we need to make sure not to do anything at the beginning of that line. Okay, here we go from the top. Loud microphone. Ready, steady, off we go. Naan bread, rice, rice. Rice, naan bread, rice. Rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice, rice. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice, rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice. Okay. I found that a little bit easier personally that time round, maybe because I'm concentrating a little bit more. That can happen. Let's try our clapping version. Forte claps, piano claps, and rests from the beginning of part 2. Ready, steady, off we go. Good, hope that was working well. So, I'm now going to show you the whole duet one more time. And I'm going to see if we can have a go at the following challenge. I would like you to read part 1, which is the top line all the way through. And I'm going to read part 2. So we should all finish together. So things to look out for are in the second line or the second system, the second pair of lines. We get to letter A, we should take it in turns to do naan breads. A little bit of to me, to you. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread. And the same thing happens later on in the second line. And if you look right at the very end at letter B, when it is piano, we should both be doing the same thing at the same time. Now we call that unison, or one sound in music. So there are 2 bars of piano where we both do exactly the same thing. Slightly different for the third section, the third bar of the last line, and then we should finish off together. So let's try this with microphones. Yes, we're going to try it straight away. We'll try it like this and then I'll do a slower tempo for you. So here I go, I'm going to read part 1 and I want you to read part 2. Ready, steady, off we go. Rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, naan bread. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice. Naan bread. I got it wrong. Should we try that one again? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop the video here and I'm going to change the tempo to give me a little bit more of a chance to get it right, and hopefully you. I'll be back with some slower music in a second. I'm back, and as you can probably tell, I've changed our tempo. To make this slower, I went into the settings. This particular ostinato is on YouTube, and I changed it from normal speed to 0.75. Hopefully this time, when I'm reading through part 1, I won't make any mistakes, and that will help you when you're reading through part 2. Okay, so I'm going to get my microphone ready. Ready, steady, off we go. Rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Rice, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, naan bread. Naan bread, rice. 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 Rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. So that's taught me the lesson. If I slow down music, it gets a little bit easier. Now let's try swapping parts. So I'm going to read part 2 and I'd like you to read part 1 with me. We're going to keep it at this slower tempo for now because it was far more successful and less confuddling for me. Okay, you ready with your microphones? You're on part 1, I'm on part 2. Ready, steady, off we go. Naan bread, rice, 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 naan bread, rice, rice, naan bread, rice, naan bread, rice, rice. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, naan bread, naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice, rice. Naan bread, rice. Naan bread, rice. One thing you might want to try doing is to see if you can record yourselves playing or saying part 1 or part 2, and then when you listen back to the recording you can see if you can play the other part along to it. So you might be able to find something that you can have an audio recording on, so that's just the sound. You might find that filming yourself is easier, or even if you just set a phone to record video, but you don't need to be to see yourself on that. You can just point it at the ceiling and then we can just listen to the sound. So if I was to do that, I'm going to record a little bit of part 1 to show you what I mean. I would have to let me know, let the other person know when it's time to start. So what I would make sure I was doing is I'd find a sensible tempo, and then I'm going to say ready, steady, off we go, and that's in time with the pulse. I'm just going to see what happens if I just do the first line, and we'll see if that works. So I'm going to do part 1. Ready, steady, off we go. Okay, so I record one part like that, making sure that I've always got the same pulse there, and then I would listen back to that and try and put part 2 in at the same time. So then you're kind of playing a duet with yourself. And you can also find a tempo or a speed that suits you, instead of choosing the silly faster tempos like I did today, just because I like the sound of the drums in the ostinato. Okay, be interested to see how you get on with that, but good luck with your first duet.